as well. It's not a stock picture. Right, let's screen. Come on. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep, perfectly, and hear you well.
Okay, that's good. So welcome back. Hope you all had a good lunch. I'm between you and doing some work, so I guess if I go really slowly, then you won't have to do anything this afternoon. Let's see how we go. I'll probably take questions at the end. There's a lot of slides to do, but if you're worried about forgetting something, stick it in the chat window, and we can come back to that afterwards as well. So a bit like Neil, I try not to tell too many lies. However, there are some roadmap futures in here, and things do change. Things get cancelled, things get delayed. Please don't assume that everything in here will happen on time, and don't put your projects based on some future that we may talk about until it's actually released. This is what we're going to talk about. We're going to quick gander through the hardware update, including some of the backup solutions. Then we're going to go into a little bit more of the lengthy, meaty bit in terms of the software. Talk about some of the stuff in operating systems, security, some of the new DevOps type features, Java middleware, and we're going to finish off with the database environment. So yeah, just before we, I don't know if I can see this, but John may be able to. So if you look at your emotions, if you click on that and then do the hands up for who is actually responsible for hardware support. That'd be interesting. I can't see the main screen, John. You probably can, so I don't know how many people in there. The hands up. If you pans down now. And the same question goes again if you go to the emotions button and you click hands up if you're supporting the software environment. Ooh, look at this. I've got a few more there. Yeah, okay.
Any more?
Hands down. That's interesting. That wasn't the way I was expecting it. Okay.
Well, the future's in software, Ian. Has nobody ever told you?
Well, there you go. There you go. So this is Dave Barry. So those of you who remember Derek Ginger, he always had Dave Barryism. So a little quote there. You know, hardware people always say it's the software section's fault, and software people always say it's the hardware section's fault. That's just how life is. So the hardware update, let's go into it. Neil mentioned a few things, but just wanted to remind you that officially shipping from our Q2, which was the 1st of February, is the new non-stop X generation. So the high-end one was the NS8. It's all X4 generation. There's not really any change in what we launched in terms of capability. However, what is coming as a future and should be part of L21.06 whenever that's released is we will be able to support up to 16 CPUs per system. The initial launch was only 8, and we will be launching limited capability InfiniBand clustering NSXCS from 2106. So that'll be local based clustering. I'm not sure how many zones are in there at the moment, but you will be able to cluster systems together in a local clustering solution. The one thing just to remember, even though NS8 and NS4 will be using Gen 10 HP servers, they use the new Cascade Lake microprocessor from Intel. And one of the things that gives us is it gives us some mitigation of some of the Intel security vulnerabilities in silicon. So that means when you turn it on, you don't actually have to have specific operating system software patches, and therefore there isn't a performance potential performance hit by turning on the mitigation to those vulnerabilities. We also have the NS4X. There's no change at all in those. It's still 2 or 4 CPUs, and up to 4 IP telco CLIMs and up to 4 storage CLIMs in there. Both NS4 and NS8, by the way, do have core licensing. NS8s you can have as 2, 4, or 6 cores, and with a license key you can turn the extra cores on online. With the NS4s, it's a single or dual core licensing, and once again, it's a license key to turn those on online. So that's a little bit like the previous generations, but it's unlike things like the NSI systems, where to increase the entry-level systems, the NS2300, 2400s, it was actually a hardware swap to be able to do that. So that's not the same on Non-Stop X. Remember as well that we have non-stop dynamic capacity on the high-end systems. So that will be NS7s and NS8s. And that allows you to scale up and scale down virtually instantaneously on demand through the NSDC license key. The minimum unit is a day, and in each license key, you get up to 30 days usage, which expire after 12 months. So that gives a nice way of handling some peaks that you might have within the year without having to permanently license the extra cores and the associated license and support costs that would go with such a permanent licensing. Do remember though, this is only scaling the cores. It does nothing for your storage. It doesn't increase the memory. It doesn't increase the network bandwidth. It's purely turning on an additional 2 cores to those that you have permanently licensed. If we move into the backup scenario, so come July the 1st, we've got some new backbox solutions being launched. So the VTC release 4 still is based on a DL380 Gen 10 server. However, it's now going to be running Windows Server 2019 and not Windows Server 2016. It has the ability internally to have 2 of these storage modules. Each one supports 64 terabytes of raw storage. So each VTC can handle a lot of storage. There's also a new option for VTC Release 4, and it's called Core Store. And Core Store does a couple of interesting things. One of which is it has a deduplication feature built into it, and the other is an encryption feature built within it. And when you license Core Store, you also effectively license an 8 terabyte storage license, which allows you to back up some of your data into storage in the cloud, as well as your local physical storage. So that's a nice new feature as well for VTC R4. It attaches to Non-Stop X, virtualized Non-Stop, the virtual converged NS2s, and also it will attach to Itanium Non-Stop I systems as well. So this is just a little architectural picture of the new VTC R4. As you can see, the cloud storage is provided with that license. In fact, you can license an extra 8 terabytes of storage for the cloud in total. And because of deduplication, effectively you get a 3-to-1 benefit in terms of the amount of storage capacity required for where you can use dedupe type of capabilities on your data. The other thing about using Core Store, with VTCs is if you've got multiple VTCs, effectively you can do some fault tolerance and some load balancing from your non-stops across those using the core store functionality. So it is really quite a nice, sexy new feature for something which is fairly standard and mundane. That's backup and restore. Along with the VTC, there's also the entry-level VTR, virtual tape repository. Effectively, this is very, very similar to the previous one, but once again, it's running on Windows 2019 as its operating system, and it comes with a fixed 16 terabyte of internal usable storage. And finally, just to remind those of you who do like physical tapes, we do have physical tape drives available for non-stop. We have the old LTO6s still available, and also we have LTO7 and LTO8 tape drives. So the serial attached SCSI tabletop is a single tape device. Then for the auto loaders, we have a fiber channel rack mount version of each, but for the tabletop, we still only have the LTO6 version of the tabletop LTO drive with the automatic cartridge loader. The other thing to note is that when you get up into LTO8 varietals, it can only read one generation back. 7s and 6s can really read 2 generations of LTOs back, so there is a slight change there as well. So let's now move swiftly onto the meat of this, which is some of the software updates and the futures in there. I can't actually see, whilst I'm in this presentation mode, if anyone has got any questions, but I say do pop them in the chat panel, and we can make sure we come back to them at the end. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the virtual non-stop roadmap. Great presentation from Fortech and Ron at Continuous this morning. But there are some quite nice things going on in this world, and something to look out for the future. So we want it to make it much easier for deployment and management of virtualized non-stop. And so what we're working on is what we like to call easy button, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that's about in a moment. We also want to enable rolling upgrades. You may want to upgrade the underlying hardware. It may be a patching regime that needs to be doing. So we want to be able to assist to make that a little bit easier. We're going to move into supporting entry class virtual non-stop, which today is only single core, to having a dual core option as well. And in connection with the Mellanox platform changes, today it's Connect X4. We need to be able to also move with them to support Connect X6. So that's something that's on the roadmap as well. In terms of our as a service model and sort of a more going down to more of cloud economics with moving towards a pay-per-use type of model, then we're looking to have integration with HPE GreenLake. And effectively what that means is when you're in the wider HPE, then if you're using GreenLake, there's a centralized GreenLake management console where you can look at all the metering and other things in there. And that's something we want to be able to have for non-stop, so it integrates within there. And then finally, I mean, we're going to have to keep tracks of what's going on in the VMware in terms of vSphere releases, and also in terms of the underlying Intel Xeon hardware platform releases. So that's the sort of roadmap we've got for VNS. I'll get rid of this. It's all right. There's a little window which is hiding some of the screen that I'm displaying. So effectively, if you like, what Ron talked about was this morning was points 1 and 4 in this slide as being, planning the system and configuring the system. And a lot of the rest of it was very much, as he said, stuff that you have to plan for, you have to design, and you have to do yourself. So we're trying to make, with the easy button features, which we're hoping to release the first phase of this in L21.06, to make things a little bit easier. So one of the things we want to be able to do that is have a readiness tool, which does some checks and produces some reports to see how you are in terms of preparation for having a VMware environment. The next bit we want to do is help you ease the deployment of the system. So there's particularly around things in terms of managing and provisioning the volumes, the storage side of the architecture, the virtualized nonstop, help being able to do that. Looking at the vReal orchestration version and moving that up to 8.0. And then finally, point 5 on this slide, for rolling upgrades and things like where you might have to do patching and stuff like that. If effectively, what you're going to have to do is look at the compute node and look at the VMs in there and potentially move those around so you can do rolling upgrades. So the idea of this enhancement in the easy button is to help you do that a little bit more easily. Because otherwise you've got to look at things as individual cores one by one and shutting them down and moving them across and various other bits and pieces on there. So that's the concept of the easy button. The full features that will probably be described, I would imagine, in the release documentation when we get to L21.06. The next thing I want to talk about is security. One of the things that Karen Copeland and TBC spoke about last year was this thing called a showcase program. And very much the showcase program is working with existing and potentially new partners and looking at an expansion of the partnership and bringing some of the tools and products that they have into the nonstop price book, and having that so basically you just have one contract. And in terms of the support, the support for these products can go via the GNSC. So the thing that we're announcing now is an extension on it, or expansion to the already existing Zypro partnership by bringing a whole bunch of new products to the nonstop price book. So these include the Security One suite. So that's coming next month to the price book. It's also a bunch of things that help you with Safeguard Manager, object security, and password quality to improve some of the capabilities within the Safeguard environment. There's also the Zygate identity connector. So that will help you integrate your non-stops with CyberArk or SailPoint. And many customers now are wanting to do that. There are also some extension plugins for existing products. So this includes plugins for the ServiceNow ITSM suite. It includes one of the RSA seams, a new plugin for that. And it also includes the two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication capability for ACI's base 24, which is effectively is a plugin that enhances XUA. So there really are some nice products. Many of you who have a long-term relationship with Zypro will know about those. For those of you who maybe aren't so close, I think these are some really nice new things. And certainly with things like PCI DSS 4.0 coming down the track, things like the extension plugins I think are going to be very useful. and also as you potentially move to zero trust environment, security one as well. We're also doing as usual, lots of different things in the non-stop operating system, in the non-stop kernel. But one of the really nice features that's been talked about for many years, but now seems to be coming to fruition as a proper project, is to provide true kernel level threading in non-stop in the non-stop kernel, and that very much will help us for the OSS environment for both 32 and 64-bit processes, and it will help us make it much easier to bring new solutions to the platform, and also make it easier to port applications from Unix and Linux type systems. And it's very much something that when you look for the Java Enterprise Edition and the Python world, it's the sort of thing which is going to make it far more attractive to deploy those sort of solutions on the non-stop server. One of the things you may have missed if you didn't go to TBC in the last couple of years is that strategically ITP Web Server is going to be replaced over time by the port we have of the Apache HTTP server, which is known as HTTP Server 2.4. Much better in terms of its integration with security standards and authentication. It's highly customizable, and it's something which is used by so many developer communities today. It has really good integration with Safeguard because of its running under TSMP. It's scalable and available, and it inherits all the benefits you'd expect of a non-stop platform. So what we're going to see in L21.06 is the first major update to HTTP Server 2.4, and we're going to provide the ability to put deployment scripts in Python 3 for message bidirectional message transfers. They'll be able to use WebSockets, and there's going to be an improved client certificate authentication capability on the non-stop for HTTP Server 2.4. Moving into more of the middleware environment, there's a new product coming out, should be in L21.06, called API Gateway 1.0. And effectively, this is going to help where you've got services on the non-stop written in C, C++, Java, COBOL, Python. It's going to help you communicate with those from an external source. So effectively, those the clients will send JSON requests, and what API Gateway does is it helps with the transformation of the messages and the routing to the various service that are required to expose that service to those clients. So we think this is going to be a really useful product to give access to some of the services that have already been written or could be written on the non-stop. So effectively what it does is there's a bit of data validation of the incoming data structure coming from the JSON messages. The JSON has to be converted into a Java object, and that Java object then needs to understand the DDL structure for the service running on the non-stop. And equally, when a reply comes, it needs to go back and translate to send things back to the client. Within the API gateway, there's dynamic routing to the services. But not only that, that routing helps you actually have some application versioning. So you can easily release some changes by having with your configuration that allows you to move to a new version through the dynamic routing in the gateway. The next thing we're doing is we're going to have a new thing called NSFTI, non-stop fault tolerant interface. And effectively what this is it's allowing an easier way for C and C++11 development for fault tolerant processes to make it much easier for them to create applications as a non-stop process pair by masking a lot of the complexities of creating and managing non-stop process pairs. So this is going to have a bunch of mapping that is able to be used. And once again, it's going to be targeted for L21.06. And finally, I've sort of slated this in the DevOps environment, but the non-stop manageability framework 1.1 allows you to basically take advantage of Red Hat Ansible and have playbooks which allow you to integrate it into that. Now, one of those things that we're interested in doing is a thing called NSMPT. These get really hard to say after a while. Non-stop management plugin for TSMP. So the idea of that is that through Python 2 and 3, you can create Ansible scripts that help you to deploy and manage the pathway domains and things in TSMP ACS. So I think that's also quite a nice new feature that's coming along. And I think part of that's also going to be seen in L21.06. So now moving on to database, as just a little bit of a recap. So in L20.10, there were a few additional features, one of which was, for those of you who are in our database environment, then effectively we have this non-stop data analyzer tool, which allows you to look in real time at what's going on in terms of your database and the queries, and look at heat maps and compare with the query what's happened to before, to be able to get alerts and see outliers and various other things. And what we're doing is the actual API that's used in NSDA, we're going to expose that so customers can have access to it. We also have completed some of the work we needed for 64-bit support and NSJ11 and NSJ8 for Java, along with SQL MX 3.7.2. In that particular L20.10 release, the operating system, then disk volumes were able to be increased to a maximum size of 1 terabyte. And there were some enhancements in terms of performance for the SQLMX optimizer. So what's coming out in the future in SQLX 3.8 is we're going to have native large objects. There'll be some additional built-in functions which will very much help us with customers who have an Oracle environment and maybe want to port their database across to SQLMX. Similarly, PLMX enhancements, which means customers who use Oracle's PL SQL will find it pretty easy to port stuff across to SQLMX, and some specific customer RFEs which have been required. So SQLMX continues to move forward. And when we talk about SQLMX 3.8, non-stop Cloud Edition, non-stop SQL Cloud Edition will obviously also take advantage of those features as well. We talked a little about NSDA previously. but the latest version 1.2 does actually give you some additional benefits, and that was available from SQLX 3.6.1. So anyone who uses NSDA for insights, AI insights into the database, that's the one they should be using. And then just to make sure that even though it's a mature database, that SQLMP is not left behind, then there's been some stuff done, or which is going to come out to help you with 64-bit support for JDBC MP. So Nonstop Java 8 will support both 32 and 64-bit architectures. NSJ8 for SQLMX already has that, and then NSJ11 will support only 64-bit architectures. So that, I think that that tidies up the access into the databases and makes that clean between both SQLMX and SQLMP for customers going forward. So surprisingly, I have finished really early, and that has taken me by surprise. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if anyone's got any questions that they would like to ask. You're all very quiet today. Either that or very shy. Let me just go to the chat box to see what's in there. Someone's asked which release the kernel level threading will be. I can't answer that. It's a future project. It's not committed right now. But the good news is it is definitely on the roadmap rather than just being talked about. James Shoebottom asks, will L2106 be delivered by the end of June? It will be delivered by June the 32nd, James. I haven't actually heard whether it's going to get done physically in June, but it will be shortly.
Iain, it's Dieter. One question to the HPE showcase. You just showed extensions from the Zypro portfolio. Yeah. Are there any other partner solutions available through the showcase program?
There will be, Dieter, but those have not been formalized to us yet. So we have to go through a whole bunch of contractual signing. We have to go through a whole bunch of transfer of information training for the GNSC before those can formally go onto the price book. So all I'm allowed to report on it from that point of view is what actually has been completed and is getting released come 1st of July.
Okay.
But I know there's a bunch of other stuff in the works, but it hasn't gone through all those processes yet. So watch this space, I think, is the answer.
Thank you, Iain.
Peter speaking. One question regarding that first section, what you presented about hardware. So your information about 8+ CPUs will be available with L2106.
That's correct.
It means that there will be no other hardware necessity or hardware requirement to be replaced. For example, some modules needs to be replaced. It is just pure software solution, right?
Yes, it's just QA. It's
perfect.
Purely QA because the InfiniBand core switches already have the capability of supporting all that. So it's a QA process that has had to go through.
Perfect. Because my question was let's say is coming from the reality that sometimes it is much better to just put 2 additional CPUs to the system, not to upgrade let's say 2-core solution with 4-core solution. So it is from cost point of view, it is sometimes significantly better just to put there 2 additional CPUs, not to activate additional cores.
Yeah, yeah, you have to look at the cases and to see where the crossover is between more cores and more CPUs. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I think most of our sales guys, if they thought they're going to sell more than 8 CPUs, would be delighted anyway. So.
Yeah, but for let's say from application point of view, it is more application transparent just to activate additional cores. So there is no necessity to do some rebalancing and so on. But sometimes
that's a great thing about the core licensing act. You're absolutely right. There's no rebalancing because the application looks at a CPU. It doesn't look at how many cores are running. So yeah, you're right.
Exactly. But from time to time means always our finance is pushing us to decrease the costs. So if we present, for example, just 2 additional cores because of requirement of our business, and then we will compare this with activation of 2 additional cores on all CPUs, there is significant difference on that.
Yeah, and then
Perfect.
of course cluster services will allow you to effectively expand over InfiniBand to a single system image more than 16 CPUs. But I don't have the details of how many nodes we're going to be able to cluster together at the moment. I'm still waiting to hear for that. I just know that that's the first release of that's going to, because you can already do it on NS7s, but we have to do a whole load of work for NS8s, and I think there's some changing in the cluster switches going on because the vendor for the cluster switches is changing their roadmap. So this had to do some work there, which it sort of wasn't worth doing the NS8's clustering QA without actually looking at some of these new cluster switches at the same time.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
What's this? Any updates on Native's performance tools like Measure? I haven't heard anything at all on that. Eve says, any updates planned for J series? J06.23.001 is, well, J06.23 is the last J series you will see. You may have a .02, which is probably going to be some critical bug fixes and some essential security mitigation things, but we're not expecting to see any more major RVUs for J series at all. So it looks like, Paul, we've actually finished early and beaten them to death.
Yeah. Finally into submission. No, thank you for that, Ian. Pleasure as always. Like I say, it seemed like it sort of, like you say, catching up on time was nice, but then finding that we're actually ahead of time was near on crazy. So, okay, what we'll do then, rather than as Ian said at the start of the session,
to work.
Yeah, as Ian said at the start of the session, all this means is that you guys can all get to work. But we'll do a quick little closing. Technology to behave with me. Essentially, just like I say, thank you all for coming virtually. Anyway, like I say, it's been a crazy couple of years. I'm no scientist, but I didn't think we was going to have to run 2 of these. But I guess that was me just trying to think positively about trying to get out of the country. Just want to sort of whittle through quickly, obviously, to the committee planning this virtual session, whether it's virtual or in person. It makes them no easier. It still takes a lot of work from these guys taking time out of their day. So thank you to all of them for helping me for what is now technically my first event. As I say, obviously it helped Neil run the last one in December, but this was technically my first one as chairman. It's been good fun. Guest speakers and vendors, like I say, that you can see the logos below. Everybody knows them by now. I thought there's some very good sessions on today. I know we had some slight issues with recording earlier in the day, but we have had slides provided, so they'll all be distributed via the website and other channels. And then obviously the recorded sessions we then have, which I believe the plan is to post them on the website, so you guys can, say any session you missed, any part you missed, you can go back and cross-check. And then ultimately to the user group, so to the users that have joined us today again, like I say, thank you for taking time out of out of busy schedules to sit down and dial in via Zoom. I hope you took any sort of nugget. I'm sure you did. Like I say, the content was great. And that's about it from me. Like I say, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and with a little bit of luck, we may catch up in person fairly soon.
Yeah,
Thank
just
you.
one thing to add, Paul. Just really to note that we do plan to hold a big SIG in December. I think at this stage we're hoping it'll be in person.
Yeah.
but who knows? But yeah, I think we're all hopeful that we can do that. But yeah, so basically, just yes, to everybody, just stay tuned, and we'll let you know through the usual marketing when we've started the big SIG preparations.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, echo that completely. It'd be great to get to see a few faces in person again for the first time in a long while. But we, like I say, we'll keep going with emotions of announcements, etc., and hopefully get a little bit of luck by December. Cool. I will close it there then. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Great show.
Bye bye.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers all. Bye bye.